Good morning. I'm Jay Hardenbrook, Advocacy Director for AARP here in Missouri. Thank you for joining us this morning for our telephone town hall to talk about voting in the upcoming November general election. As a nonprofit, nonpartisan social mission organization, AARP wants to encourage and stress the importance of voting. As a reminder, AARP does not support any candidates for partisan office. Voting and voting rights have always been a core issue for AARP and the 50-plus population. In Missouri's November election, voters over the age of 50 often account for the majority of people casting ballots. AARP will never tell you who to vote for in an election, but we know that our success in delivering for the 50-plus population relies on our constituency being willing and able to vote. As Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft is the top election official in the state of Missouri, and as such, he works with county clerks and election authorities in managing the voting system for our entire state and assisting Missouri voters in casting their votes under the laws and regulations of our state. Before I turn to Secretary Ashcroft for his comments and insights, I'd like to go over the ground rules for today's conversation on making sure your vote counts in the upcoming November election. This is an interactive forum, and after hearing our brief opening presentation, you will have the chance to ask your questions live on this call, and we'll do our best to answer them. If you would like to ask a question at any time during this call, just press *3, that's *3 on your telephone keypad to be connected with an AARP staff member who will note your name and question and place you in the queue. The sooner you press *3, the sooner you will be online with the Secretary. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest for this call. We are joined once again this morning by Missouri Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. Secretary, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jay. I'd like to thank you and AARP for having these calls. You've put up with me several times to do this, and I hope that they're informative. I don't want to go long because I want to get to questions and make sure we're answering and giving the information that people request. So I just want to really reinforce one thing before we get to those questions. Hopefully, if there's just one thing you get away from this call, listeners, I hope I will push you gently, kindly, to get a sample ballot before you go to the polls so that you know what will be on the ballot, you know the individuals, you know the issues, and for those individuals where you already know how you want to vote, you're set. But for those issues or individuals where maybe you don't or where you're new to thinking about that, you can self-educate yourself. Don't necessarily believe me or Jay, no offense, Jay, or the TV or the radio. Self-educate and make sure your voice is heard. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Without further ado, Jay, I'm happy to take questions if we have some. And I think I'm supposed to remind people frequently, go ahead, press *3 if you have a question. The sooner you do that, the sooner it gets answered. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. And we will be taking questions in just a few minutes. So again, I'll reiterate again, press *3 now on your telephone keypad if you have a question to speak to an AARP staff member who will put you in a queue to ask your question live on this call. If you've just joined our call, I'm Jay Hardenbrook, the Advocacy Director for AARP here in Missouri. And this is a live telephone town hall, and we're joined today by Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. Now, let's go ahead and start answering. Oh, it looks like we've still got some people being screened, so we won't answer questions yet. I'll go ahead and ask a question of you, Secretary. So leading up to this election, I know we seem to always have these questions, but about the ID requirements for voting. How can people make sure that they will be able to vote when they show up in November? And what should they do in preparation besides very good point on making sure they get the sample ballot ahead of time? But what do they need to do to make sure that they're ready and able to vote as quickly as possible on Election Day?
Well, great question. Obviously, first and foremost, they need to make sure that they are registered to vote. The last day to register to vote for the November 5th election is October 9th. They can do that online at sos.mo.gov. They can do that at govotemissouri.com. If they will, when they go vote, they will be asked for that government-issued photo ID, like a driver's license, a non-driver's license, passport, military ID, something like that. If they're unsure if the ID they have is the best one they can use, they should feel free to call our toll-free number for elections at 1-800-669-8683. If someone feels like they don't have an ID that would be a good one so they wouldn't have to use a provisional ballot, our office is happy to help them get a government-issued photo ID for them to use. And if there are maybe documents in another state from a marriage or divorce or a birth certificate or something that they need for underlying documents, we can help get those also at no cost. I would encourage people, if they might need our help getting an ID, to call us very quickly, maybe right after this phone call, because it does take a little bit of time at times, and we're happy to get that done. But of course, the good news is if you show up on Election Day, as long as you're registered, you will be able to vote. If you don't have that government-issued photo ID, you'll have to do a provisional ballot, and they'll have to verify your signature once the polls close, but you still will be able to vote as long as you are registered.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we will actually go to some questions from the callers. Let's see. I don't have a name for this one, but it's a number that ends in 4837. Are you there? Number ending in 4837. Are you there?
Hello?
Hello, yes. Go ahead. What's your question for the Secretary?
Hi, my question is, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and I wanted to vote early, but I'll vote at a site and turn it in at a site. How can I do that?
Well, there are, so you want to go vote in person, is what you're saying, to vote early? Now, is this because you have one of the legal excuses, like you can't be at the polling place on Election Day? Because you can go ahead and do that right now. And if you want to find the contact information for your local election authority, we have contact information for all the election authorities across the state. You can get to that at govotemissouri.com. If you do not have one of the statutory reasons, you're out of the jurisdiction on Election Day, you are homebound, generally because of a physical disability, just cannot get to the polling place on Election Day. Certain first responders, if you just want to use the 2 weeks of no excuse in-person voting, that doesn't start until October 22nd. But if you want to go in person and you have one of those excuses, you can do that now. Just reach out to the St. Louis County Board of Elections. We have their contact information on our website, and check to see exactly where they're locating those no excuse in-person voting, and then you can just go do that. And if you have further questions, if you reach out to them, they're not helpful, always feel free to call us too. But I would suggest going directly to them to, confirm their address.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on whether you're in the county or the city, obviously that election authority is different.
Oh, yes.
But they both do have places where you can go and vote absentee right now, and then in the future have vote absentee without an excuse later as well. Is that the last 2 weeks, Secretary?
Yes, it is,
election?
and it starts on October 22nd.
All right, fantastic. Hopefully that answered your question for you. It looks like we have another person ready to ask a question.
Great.
Mary from St. Louis, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Mary, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, I really have two questions. The first
Go
one,
ahead.
are there any attachments to like Amendment 2 and 3 that really do not apply to them? It's just a way to get something through? And then my second question had to do with that absentee voting. Are we absolutely sure that those ballots will be counted? Because I am planning on voting early, no excuse. But we have heard that sometimes if it looks like they're not needed, that they don't even bother with absentee ballots.
Well, thank you. Let me address both of those questions. I'll go in reverse order if that's okay. Under Missouri law, those absentee ballots are required to be counted no matter how close the election is. If it's 100 votes to 0, that's obviously not going to, well, I mean, I guess it could happen. Those absentee ballots still must be counted because it's your vote. And we want to make sure that every registered voter that takes the time to vote, they know that their ballot is counted and is part of the final number. So yes, those absentee ballots are required by law to be counted. With regard to your first question, I really I have to just suggest that you actually read the full language of those. It's not for me as an elected official in my official capacity. I got to be careful. So what I would suggest is anybody that wants can go to sos.mo.gov, and there's a banner across the website that you can just click on, and it sends you to the actual language. It says 2024 general election ballot measures. That sends you to the actual language that will either be put into statute or put into the Constitution if it's approved. So you don't have to just take my word for what I think it will do or Jay's word for what he thinks it will do or someone else's. You can read the actual language of the potential amendments and the potential statutory change. That's really the best way for you to do that. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, you should make your own decision. It should not be someone from the government telling you, oh, this is how you need to vote on that.
Thank you. Very, very good point. And again, I will encourage people to press *3 if you're interested in asking a question. We are in an enviable position this year of not supporting or opposing any of the ballot initiatives. So we actually don't have any information that we're putting out about it, but I would suggest, as we have in the past when we have supported or opposed ballot initiatives, take a look at the people who are in support and opposition, look at their things, but also, as the Secretary said, take the time to actually read what's in the actual language, because that's what's going to be the most important thing. All right, we have another call. It looks like Marion from Olivet. Are you there?
Yes.
All right, what's your question, Marion?
My question is actually about the judges that's on the ballot. I wanted to know the resources that you could find, or where can you find it, to get an understanding of who they are and what they represent.
That is a wonderful question and a very difficult question for me to answer in my official capacity, where I'm not supposed to be taking sides.
Okay.
I know.
I just want to know what resources are available. That's a hard thing to find, actually. I mean,
the Missouri Bar puts out some information about them.
Okay.
You know, some people would say that the Missouri Bar is the gold standard. Some people would say they're not. That's your decision. You could, I guess, just do a Google search or something like that to see about reported cases. If you know attorneys, and I'm an attorney, so I understand that people don't like to admit they're attorneys or admit that they have friends that are attorneys. But maybe if you have a good friend that's an attorney, maybe they can help you with that. I'm not saying this is what you should do.
No.
I always just vote against every judge because I figure if I think in the history of the Missouri plan, only 5 of them have ever been voted out.
Okay.
But maybe I'll do my part to put the fear of God into them and maybe that'll make them work harder. I don't know. Not a great answer. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
I would say, Marion, go ahead and look at the Bar Association. They do lay out whether someone is qualified or not. But then also, it really is one of those things. If you have very specific court cases that you're interested in, yeah, go ahead and Google those judges, see if they support the positions you want. I don't think there are any major campaigns against any of the judges out there right now. So it is one of those things where you just kind of have to look for yourself. And that's the way it goes with the Missouri court plan sometimes. All right. Well, we have more questions, and I will say again, if you're interested in asking a question, feel free to press *3 on your telephone keypad.
Jay?
You'll be connected. Yes, go ahead.
I hate to bother you, but if you do go to the Missouri Bar website to check on the retention for judges, please ignore the election date because they have the election date wrong.
Oh, my goodness. Well, always good to have that information wrong. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to another question. Looks like we have Cheryl from St. Louis. Cheryl, are you there? Cheryl from St. Louis, are you there? We may have lost Cheryl.
Are you looking for me? I'm the husband of Bob.
Oh, there you go, the husband of Cheryl. Then go ahead.
I'm sorry. For some reason, we're listed as Cheryl. Anyway, yeah, I'm very concerned that people who have the legitimate right to vote be allowed to vote. And there's this national database, which is the most updated information for who lives where, and whether they're legitimate, called ERIC. And you decided to take Missouri out of that database. And I can't understand why somebody who cared about only legal people voting would do such a thing. I wanted an explanation.
Yeah, we did that because Eric made a lot of claims about the fullness of their data, and we found that the claims weren't accurate, that there was data that they were not sharing with us. And actually, since we've been back working directly with Social Security Administration and working with the U.S. Post Office, we've actually seen more updates to our system and cleaner data than we had with Eric. So it really just came down to the fact that we were spending a bunch of taxpayer dollars and they weren't giving us the services that they had promised. And we found that we could do it without spending that money and actually do it better working directly with the Social Security Administration and the U.S. Post Office and others. So that's why we did that.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much for answering the question, Secretary. And again, if you'd like to ask a question of the Secretary, please feel free to press *3 on your telephone keypad. We do have several who are lined up right now, so we want to make sure that we get your question answered. All right. Next, we have Nancy from Baldwin. Nancy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Nancy, go ahead and ask your question.
My question is, where do we go to read about the candidates and the amendments so I can make better choices when I go to vote?
That's a great. Go ahead.
No, and then where can I get a sample ballot so I have a paper copy for me to look at?
Great questions. It was a good question, great question, and you asked the second one, which made it even better. To get a sample ballot, you reach out to your local election authority. I don't want to be impertinent, but do you know kind of roughly where do you live? What county or?
Sorry about that. She's already been. I've pushed her back off. I apologize.
My bad. Don't worry.
But, yes.
If you go to govotemissouri.com, govotemissouri.com, all one word. From there you can find contact information for every election authority across the state. So if you want if you want a sample ballot, those are all done by the individual 116 local election authorities across the state. So you need to get that from them. But we have contact information for every local election authority across the state. If for some reason you have trouble navigating the website, call us. 1-800-669-8888. 1-800-848-8683. That's the toll-free number for elections. You can always just use that number and call us. We'll ask you a couple of questions to find out where you live so we know who your election authority is, and then we can give you their contact information. I just don't have all 116 memorized, so I apologize for that.
You don't?
No. And then with regard to finding information, the best, most unbiased information you can find on the actual statewide issues is going to be on our website, where we just have the text of the issue. And you can go to sos.mo.gov, and there will be a big banner at the top of the website where it says click to see the 2024 general election ballot measures. You click on that, and it will have every ballot measures. It will have the ballot language that will be on the ballot, but then I think it's right below that, it actually has the full text. That's not what I think it should say, or Jay, or anybody else. That's what would go into the Constitution or into the revised statutes. That's the best way to know exactly what you're voting on. With regard to candidates and kind of organizations talking about different issues, that's really going to depend on the organizations that you kind of have an affinity for. You know, if I know that sometimes AARP has information on those things. I know that your local Republican or Democrat Central Committee sometimes has information on that. Sometimes the Libertarians do, but not quite as often. There are all sorts of third-party organizations, but it's really not for, I'm sorry, it's not for me as an official using taxpayer dollars to tell you which one of those you should listen to.
Yeah, and I again...
Maybe Jay can give you some, but I'm not supposed to.
I would say, again, it's one of those things where it's probably best to, especially if you're trying to decide between candidates, Google their names, because most of them will have a website with their issues and even contact information if you need to call and talk to somebody about a very specific issue that you're concerned about. It's the nice thing about having as many state representatives as we have. You probably know your state representative. They're pretty close to the ground. So hopefully you can get the answers you need from looking online, and pulling up that sample ballot always helps me a lot so that I can look through and see who I'm going to be voting for, what I'm going to be voting for. And I will say again, if you're interested in asking a question of the secretary on this call, feel free to press *3 on your telephone keypad. Again, that is *3, and we will put you in the queue to ask a question. All right. It looks like we have more questions here. Beverly from Bridgeton, are you there?
I am.
Beverly, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. So yesterday in the mail, I got this flyer that says false. Legalized sports betting generates tens of millions for schools. Has a big stamp on it that that's false for Amendment 2. So what I want to know is, are the classrooms and teachers pay, are they going to get money from if we vote for this gambling Amendment 2? Because according to this flyer, that's not going to happen.
Jay,
very
and ma'am,
good
that's a great question. And this is a great example because I'm sure that there are people getting flyers that are saying directly contradictory things. I have seen TV ads that say that if sports betting is passed, that will do wonderful things for funding of education in our state. I have also seen ads, generally right after that one, on the exact same television channel, saying that if sports betting is passed, it won't do anything to support education in our state.
Yeah, so.
Unfortunately, we have a problem in this country where it is not illegal for people to vote. I want it to be legal for people to vote. Where it is not illegal for people to lie about candidates and issues. And this is why I encouraged everyone at the beginning of the call to get a sample ballot. And this is why when people have asked, so how do I find out information? I've been like, well, if you know someone you trust, ask them, because it is very difficult to know the truth about what will happen with some of these, since at least one of the sides is lying, and I bet on some of these issues, both of the sides are lying. It's very difficult to know what the truth is. With regard to financial aspects of the issues, the state auditor is required to do a fiscal note. That fiscal note can be found on our website, and if you go to that banner I've been talking about to see the full information about the statewide issues, you can see that fiscal note. I will tell you that sometimes organizations disagree with the fiscal note that the state auditor gives them. So I want to be careful and just be forthright with you that there is disagreement about those fiscal notes. But at least with the fiscal note, the auditor is required and does explain why they got to that fiscal note. That might help you, but unfortunately, it's very difficult for everyday people to know what a candidate will do or an issue will do if passed or elected, because they lie. I'm sorry.
Oh, geez.
It is one of those very tricky things, Beverly, about, and I often tell people, stop paying attention to like political advertising as we get closer and closer to the election, because they seem to get more and more misleading as the closer we get to the election. But really, this is, again, one of those things where you kind of have to do the research for yourself. And, you know, that anytime you get a claim like that where you want to check it out, best thing to do is to go to a different source and try to get the information. Because like the secretary said, oftentimes you get the exact opposite thing said about something. And really, I think the interesting thing about any of these issues is like look at the core issue first. Like in this case with sports betting, do you want there to be sports betting or not? And whether that funds education or not is a separate question almost, right? So I think it's one of those things where you kind of have to look at it at what the actual core is, rather than focusing on where the money may go. It's tricky, but it's just kind of the way it is. And again, those fiscal notes are very helpful.
So I can't get that answer today.
Not from us, but you can certainly get that answer online.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Beverly. All right, and once again, if you're interested in asking a question like Beverly just did, feel free to press *3 on your telephone keypad. Again, that is *3. And I'm going to bring in another question. I do not have the name for this caller, but their number ends in 9312. Are you there?
I am, yes. Good morning.
Excellent. Go ahead and ask your question.
My name is Anna. I know. Yes. So I am a member of the League of Women Voters, and we are, our education committee is spending quite a bit of time in high schools registering students to vote. It's a desire of the Columbia Public Schools to make sure that all our students, if possible, are registered voters by graduation time. Now, I have a problem with the wording that I need clarification, because I have spoken with many wise people and we cannot seem to come to agreement. So I'm going to be reading you from the Missouri voter registration application. Question 1 asks, are you a citizen of the United States of America, yes or no? Clearly you have to answer yes to even continue with the application. It is question number 2 that is causing some consternation. Number 2 says, will you be 18 years of age on or before Election Day, yes or no? So my question is this. Following those 2 questions in red letters, it says, if you check no in response to either of the above questions, do not complete this form. So I've talked to the city clerk's office. I've talked to your office, and my question is, technically, students are allowed to register when they're 17 and a half. However, if they are not, and I'm particularly interested in this election, if they are not 18 by November, can they still register, or should they not register until after the election? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do. That's a very good question. My understanding is that the law has an "and" in it. So if you are 17 and a half and will be 18 years of age, either on the next election day or prior to that, then you're allowed to register. The idea is to make sure that if you would be able to vote in that election, you have the opportunity to be registered for it. So I believe it is an "and." You have to meet both qualifications. Not only do you have to be 17 and a half, but it also has to be, the timing has to be such that on election day or before, you will be 18.
Okay, so that answers the question. Now, having said that, I'm wondering if you guys could, in the office, clarify this registration application. I mean, it doesn't really apply to a lot of students, but, you know, we are trying to work with students, get them interested and involved in the elections. And it really has been a little bit ambiguous, but I thank you. So, no, I have my answer, and I appreciate it. So basically,
yeah, unfortunately,
do not fill it in unless you're going to be 18 on November 5th, okay?
By November, either on November 5th or by November 5th. And
right.
That form is, the language that we're required to use comes directly from statute. So in statute, they said, this is what you need to do. So that's why it's written the way it is.
Oh, very nice. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It is
always
very tricky.
Clarity, always clear clarity in languages. Okay, well, we don't want to lose the. I'm feeling badly because I've been letting kids who will not be 18 by November 5th sign up. So I'm going to have to get these forms back to them and tell them they're going to have to come back and re-register. But at least I know what the answer is, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And it is, I understand it can be very tricky, and especially as someone who has a child who just is going to be able to vote for the first time in this coming election. Yeah, it was a little tricky to figure out exactly when they could register. So I understand your concern and apologize. These things get kind of tricky sometimes. All right. Well, thank you so much for that question. And again, this is Jay Hardenbrook with AARP, and we're joined by Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. If you would like to ask a question of the Secretary, please feel free to press *3. That's *3 on your telephone keypad. And it looks like we had a few more questions lined up. Hold on just a second. Let's see. Well, we'll go ahead and go to Kenneth in St. Peters. Are you there?
Yep, it's me. Here I am.
All right. Go ahead and ask your question.
State, aren't these the same actors that we saw in the 30s in Germany, excluding Kamala Harris? Aren't these the same actors?
Well, that's going into a very partisan realm for us that we will not be able to answer today. I'm sorry, Kenneth. But if you have a question about voting or the specifics of it, we're happy to answer that. Unfortunately, as a nonpartisan organization and the Secretary in his role as the Chief Election Officer for the state, we're trying to avoid getting into the partisan stuff today, Kenneth. So I apologize for that. It looks like we do have some other questions, though. And again, if you would like to ask a question, feel free to press *3 on your telephone keypad. Looks like we have Joanne. Joanne, are you on the line?
Yes, thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely.
This has been very helpful information. My mom, she's 85, and I want to make sure she votes. However, she doesn't drive. She has a state ID, but she can't find it. And I don't know that she'll be able to get one in time for the election. And if she does a provisional ballot, I think they call it.
Yes.
how do I know that it gets counted, and can I take her there with some kind of other ID?
Great question. If you want to check on whether or not you have an ID that meets the requirement, I would encourage you to call our 1-800 number, 1-800-669-8683, 1-800-669-8683, and anybody listening to this call that has a question, please feel free to use that number. But more importantly, as long as your mother is registered, and I'm assuming you've made sure that she is or she has, when she arrives on Election Day, she will be able to vote even without having that ID. Now, if she has to do a provisional ballot because she doesn't have an ID that meets the requirements, every provisional ballot goes in a provisional ballot envelope. And that ballot envelope has a code on it, and there's two of them. Not to cheapen voting, but if anybody's ever done a 50-50 raffle where you buy the ticket and you keep one half of the ticket has your number on it, you keep it. The other half of the ticket also has that number, and it gets thrown into the box for the raffle. With the provisional ballot envelope, that ballot envelope has a code on it to identify it, and then it also has a tear strip on it with the exact same code that you tear off. So as the voter or someone assisting your mother voting, if she does that provisional ballot, you can then call that code a day or 2, 3 days after the election to find out, generally the day after, to find out what happened with that ballot. Did that ballot get counted? Did the signature match? So that there is a way for you to verify that that ballot was counted.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Secretary. And I have, I will remind people to press *3 on their telephone keypad if they'd like to ask a question. I also have been ignoring the people on Facebook, so I apologize for that. We do have a question from the folks online. So what is the early voting period for the general election? I know we covered that earlier, but people are joining at random times. The early voting period for the general election and also the absentee in-person period of time.
Great. Absentee voting for people with one of the statutory reasons, be that in-person or mailing it back in, that's already started. So that started on September 24th, so just 2 days ago. With regard to no excuse in-person voting, that actually starts on October 22nd. Okay, so if you want to request that absentee ballot, get it mailed to you and then mail it back to you, or if you want to go vote absentee in person, you can do that right now. If you don't have that excuse, then you need to wait until October 22nd. But and I will give a little bit of an editorial here, but I don't think it's partisan. If you are going to be voting absentee, if it is at all possible, vote absentee in person. The reason why I say that is you will be given your ballot, you will fill it out, and then you will put it into the tabulator. You know that that ballot gets accepted. If the tabulator has trouble reading it, it indicates that, and you get a second chance. You can say, oh, wait, I want to correct this, or I don't, depending on what you want to do. If you just mail it in, you are trusting the post office to make sure it gets back in time. And I'm not trying to be inappropriate toward the post office, but we regularly see absentee ballots that take over 2 weeks to get back. And ballots have to, except for limited ballots for like military overseas individuals, we give them a grace period of a couple days. But everyone else, your ballot has to be in by 7 o'clock on Election Day. So if at all possible, and, maybe we have someone here that, just walking up the stairs to their polling place is difficult, or standing in line. If you can get to the polling place in your car, we have election authorities that will send out a bipartisan team to come out to your car. They call it curbside voting. and there will be a Republican and a Democrat. They'll come out together, and you get to make sure that that ballot gets voted and it gets counted. 2 years ago, I was talking to one of our election authorities down in Southwest Missouri. They had a ballot came back over a year after it had been mailed in. I want your vote to count. I want you to go to the trouble of studying what's on the ballot, studying the issues, studying the people, and then whatever you determine, I want it to matter. I want it to be in the total count. I liken it to winning the lottery. If Jay won $1 billion lottery, he's not going to take his lottery ticket and tape it to a postcard and mail it back to the lottery commission. I'm pretty sure that Jay's going to get some friends. They're going to steal that winning lottery ticket for $1 billion into a special container and lock it. And they're going to probably convoy down to Jefferson City to make sure that lottery ticket gets paid off. Take care of your ballot the same way. If you can, go in person and vote.
I think it would be in a briefcase handcuffed to my wrist, but you don't have to be quite that specific when you're going to the with your vote. So that's at least good. All right, it looks like we have questions on Facebook, and I swear I will get back to you all. But we also have some people live on the phone that have some questions as well. Looks like we have a question from Diane. Diane, are you there?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Well, I maybe the Secretary of State touched on this because I was talking to the gal, but sometimes the ballot language is so long that when you're in voting, it takes forever to kind of figure it out and go through it all because it's sometimes confusing. When it says yes, it means no. Is there a way to read it ahead of time that's not online?
That's a good question.
Yes. The easiest way is online, but our office will be printing every statewide issue in newspapers in every county of the state. So wherever you live in this state, there will be at least one newspaper where over a matter of weeks they reprint every one of the statewide issues. Now, in some counties, it will be in multiple papers over a 2-week period. In other counties, there will be one paper, and it will be printed over a 4-week period of time. That's just going back to what the Constitution is pretty precise about how to do that. And if you are not someone that goes online and you want to know what paper it will be in where you live, I would encourage you, as I would encourage anyone with questions about the elections, to just call our office at 1-800-669-8683, and we can let you know in which newspaper that will be printed for your area if you'd like. But that's anything else that might be printed out. I don't know that it's official. So I can't stand up and tell you that if you get it somewhere else, I know that it is word for word what you will be voting on. I hope that
is tricky. Obviously, we do still have some members who do not have access to the internet, and so and especially on phone calls like this, we tend to get several members who don't have access to the internet. So it's good that there are places where you can see it printed out. I would also say you can, get to, say, your church or your senior center or someplace where they can print off something online for you. That's also a possibility. So there are... Or
the library. Our libraries, our public libraries across the state, they'd be happy to help you get to the Secretary of website using the library and print it off. And I think most of our libraries, it's like 10 cents a page, although there are a lot of issues, so it probably will be like 20 or 30 pages.
Well, and a nice plug for another department that you oversee, which is the library. So good plug for them as well. I will do one more question from online. This one is relatively easy, but somebody was asking where can they go to register to vote or to make sure they're registered to vote in Greene County?
Well, in Greene County, Shane Scholler is the county clerk. They can reach out to the Shane Scholler's office. If they want, though, they can also, as always, they can call our office at 1-800-669-8683. We will need to ask a couple of somewhat personal questions to make sure it's you and not someone pretending to be you. That's the only reason why we do that, is we want to keep your data secret and only provide it to you. If anybody needs to register to vote, you can register at any of the 116 local election authorities across the state. You can register online at govotemissouri.com or sos.mo.gov, but probably easiest to remember, Go Vote Missouri, all one word, Go Vote Missouri, all spelled out, .com. And also, just to give a shameless plug for libraries, because I love libraries, virtually all of our libraries have voter registration forms. You can register also at the DMV, or when you're interacting with social services or with the health department, they can also do that for you also.
Well, we are getting close to the end of time, but I want to make sure I get a couple more questions in since people have been waiting patiently. So let's go to Richard in Liberty. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead and ask a question.
Okay, my question is, this is a country of people kind and nice to each other, so why can't we do something about candidates putting other candidates down? I think they should spend more time providing information about themselves and not discussing the opposing candidate. There should be something that could be done about this.
Well, you're not going to like my answer. But I always tell Jay, I'll be honest, there is something that can be done on this. The way to fix that is not to vote for people that all they do is attack other people or lie. But as someone that's been on the ballot many times, sometimes winning, sometimes losing, I will tell you, candidates have success at attacking the other side. And if we as a country want to stop that and have elections that are based on policies and not just attacks, which I think would benefit us all, then we have to start voting against people that don't do that. But as long as we vote for the people that attack the other guy or gal, the other gentleman or lady, then that's what they're going to do. Politicians, candidates, they do what works. And I mean this politely, we are responsible for the individuals we elect, because in our country, they get elected based on our votes. And if we vote for bad people, we kind of deserve them.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone who's run a lot of campaigns who I was asking specifically about this, like why all the negative campaigning, and they said because it works. People tend to vote for you if you use negative campaigning, which is unfortunate. Definitely, but I understand where you're coming from, Richard. Thank you for the question. I'm going to do one more question from Facebook before we wrap up, and I think this is an important one that we haven't covered yet. On Election Day, since that is when a lot of our members like to vote, how long are the polls going to be open?
The polls are open from 6 o'clock in the morning until the last person in line at 7 o'clock votes. And what I mean by that is this. Polls close at 7, but if you were in line to vote at 7 o'clock and there's 500 people ahead of you, there won't be, but if there were, you would still be allowed to vote. At 7 o'clock, the polling location goes out and sees if there's a line. If there is a line, then they identify who was in line at 7 o'clock, and those people are allowed to vote. So even if for some reason you're in a really long line at 6:59, at 7 o'clock you're still in line, you will be allowed to vote if you otherwise, you're registered and meet the requirements. Just stay in line, and the poll will stay open for everyone that was in line at 7 o'clock to vote. So it's 6 to 7 with the caveat that if everybody comes at 6:58, if 20 people come at 6:59, they'll still be able to vote, even though they're probably not all going to vote in 1 minute.
Very good point. Thank you. Always stay in line. Even if the polls close, stay in line. You should still get to vote. That said, I try to make sure that I show up as early as I can in the morning. And since the polls open at 6, I can do that before I start work for the day. So the earlier you can get there, obviously, the better. Make sure your vote is cast. Well, as I mentioned, we've come to the end of our Tele-Town Hall event today. So unfortunately, we have to wrap up our conversation. If you did not get a chance to ask your question, I encourage you to stay on the line and leave a message for us. And if you've asked questions online, we will try to respond to those in the way that they were asked as well. Please remember that there are 3 ways that you can register to vote in the upcoming November election. You can register to vote online, as the Secretary said on their website. You can register in person at your local election authority, whether that's an election board or a county clerk, or you can do it by mail. Please visit the Missouri Secretary of State's office, their website, for more information. The last day to register to vote, once again, is October 9th. Again, I would like to thank our special guest, Missouri Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, for joining us once again. And thank you so much for joining us so many times. And we would also like to thank each and every one of you on the call, the AARP members from across the state who've joined us on this important call. Again, I apologize if we were not able to answer your question, but please stay on the line as we end this call to leave a message or with your comment or question, and someone will get back to you. Also, if you would like to listen to a recording of this morning's call, we will be posting the entire conversation on our AARP Missouri State webpage, which is www.aarp.org/mo, as in Missouri, aarp.org/mo. We welcome you to spread the word to friends and family that they can go to our webpage, again, aarp.org/mo, to replay this call. The audio recording will be posted by early next week. Do you have any closing statements before we sign off, Secretary?
I just want to thank everybody that took the time to be a part of this, that's going to take the time to get a sample ballot and self-educate. Good citizenship takes work. And the people on this call, I think, are great examples of that, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you again, Secretary. And in closing, I am Jay Hardenbrook from AARP Missouri, thanking you for joining our conversation, and I would encourage you to make your voice heard in the upcoming election on November 5th. The future of your health care, long-term care, and financial security rely on you and your neighbors making your voice heard at the ballot box, so we can all continue to hold Missouri elected officials accountable. Goodbye for now, and have a great afternoon, and remember to vote on November 5th.